Well, hey, everybody. We want to welcome you as you're logging in here this evening, joining Kevin and I on our presentation. Super excited to be with you this evening to talk about just this whole concept of um, both financial aid and the admissions process and all those types of things. We'll give it just a couple of seconds as everybody's getting in here. But why don't you do us a favor? We like to have a little bit of fun with this in the chat box or chat. Why don't you go ahead and put in where you're from, what state you're from, and maybe your graduation year as well. Let's just hear what where you're from and what's going on out there. All right. Hey, somebody's from Kentucky. I love you.
26.
Thanks for being here tonight. And Portland, Texas, Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Arizona. My
All
goodness,
over.
they're all over the place. Glad to have you with us tonight. Lots of 2026s. So you guys are doing a great job planning ahead. We've got somebody from North Carolina in 28, uh, Florida. I mean, all over the place. I mean, shoot, we may have just about every single state here tonight. Kevin, California, of course. Yeah, super excited to have you here. Maryland and Arizona. All right.
Think we're pretty well represented. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Let me start sharing my screen. All right. But okay, so if this is someone's first time joining us, we are College Aid Pro. And our goal is to help families really, yes, shop smarter for college, but to make this process easy, to help save you money, and to make it manageable. Dan, maybe you want to introduce yourself, and then I'll introduce myself.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Kevin. So, yeah, my name is Dan Bisig, and I have been an independent educational consultant now for 19 years. Prior to that, I was a financial planner for about 25 years. I know I don't look that old, but I promise you that I've got a
Oh,
lot of experience. And they call me a little bit of a unicorn because I do both the admissions process as well as the financial aid side of things. So just excited to be with you this evening to talk through this.
we're lucky to have you.
Yeah, thanks,
Um,
Kevin. You too.
oh, thank you. And yeah, I'm Kevin Murphy. I'm one of the college financial aid experts here at CAP. I got into this from financial services and never looked back. I love this what we do for families. But yeah, I'm been doing this since 2018. Fortunately, I've worked with a little over 1,000 families. When it comes to this financial aid process, when it comes to pretty much this entire process, I don't think you could stump me. But let's get started. Enough about us, right? So, where do you start? And what's the first step you should take? Now, our MyCap tool is free for families to sign up for. So you can go in, you can get started, you can create your free account. I try not to do it while we're talking tonight, but right after the presentation. And you can put 3 schools in, and you can see what those schools are going to cost your family. Now, I will, or actually, Dan, could you drop in the chat the mycap.collegeaidpro.com so everyone knows where to go to create their free account? And then we will move forward. So financial aid. Financial aid is ultimately just a discount off the college cost. And I think there's a lot that falls under the general umbrella of financial aid, right? A lot of people hear financial aid and the first reaction is need-based financial aid based on our income and assets and grants. Yes, that is one type of financial aid. Need-based grants are awarded based on your family's finances, largely your income and assets. But then there's also merit-based scholarships, right? That is also considered financial aid. But merit-based scholarships have nothing to do with your finances. They're all based on your students' academics. Think test scores, GPA, all of the talent factors and admissions factors, right? And then the last source of financial aid, which I personally don't really consider it financial aid, but is self-help. And that would be loans like the federal direct student loan, and then work study. And work study is the opportunity to get a job on campus and earn some money, but you have to work for it. And loans you have to pay back with interest. So it's important to keep that in mind. Now, how do you know if you're eligible for need-based financial aid? It's pretty easy, right? So go to MyCap, like we mentioned, put your information in. But the actual formula is the total cost of attendance. So essentially the sticker price, the all-in number at a given college, which will always be on its website, minus your student aid index. Your student aid index is your family contribution, what's used to determine how much financial aid you're eligible for. The difference between those two numbers equals your financial need. And then it's up to the colleges to meet that need. So let's just throw some numbers in here. If a college were to cost $80,000 and your student aid index were 40,000, well, you would have $40,000 of need. Now, how much of that $40,000 does the college give you? And that's going to vary from school to school. Some will give you the full 40. Some may only give you 20, 10, or nothing. So that's very important. And it's important to understand if you are eligible for need-based aid. Dan will go into financial fit as part of the college search later on, but you have to know if you're eligible or not because some colleges only give need-based aid. And if you don't qualify for any, then they could be very expensive. Now, what is factored into our SAI or our family contribution? All of your non-retirement assets, right? So your 401k is excluded. IRAs are excluded. Roth traditional doesn't matter. 403bs, all of that's excluded. Qualified annuities, those are not counted. Life insurance, that's not counted. But what is counted? Your non-retirement assets, your checking account, your savings account, all of the assets that you have that are not in qualified retirement accounts. And it's good to understand how they are considered. Parent assets are factored into the federal formula, your SAI, at 5.64%. That's much less than a student asset. A student asset has nearly 4 times the impact. It's counted at 20%. So if your student were to have money in their account and it's on the forms, it's going to reduce financial aid quite a bit more than if you were to have money in your non-retirement accounts. Now, grandparent 529s, they are not included on the form, on the FAFSA, right? And sibling 529s, so 529s that are not for the student whose form you're filing, they are not included on the FAFSA either. That's actually a big change that happened 2 years ago. Now, UGMA accounts and UTMA accounts, these are student assets, right? And usually there's some big planning opportunities if your student has one of these accounts to kind of address this before you file the forms. Now, parent-owned 529s, those are considered an asset as long as they're for the student whose form you're filing. And then jointly owned account. Think like a jointly owned checking account or a jointly owned savings account. We're okay if you include that as a parent asset. Now, when it comes to real estate, your primary residence is excluded on the FAFSA. So the house that you live in, the house that you reside in, the equity in that, that's not included. However, if you own additional properties, investment properties, a beach house, whatever it may be, the equity in those homes, that is included as an investment, literally a liquid asset and a liquid investment that you could use as a resource. And all of these assets, they ask you for them as of the day you file the financial aid forms, right? So if you file the financial aid forms on October 15th of your student's senior year, that's the day that you're supposed to report the assets. Now, assets are one component of this SAI, this family contribution. Your income is actually a much greater component. And this is a little confusing, but the colleges use the prior year as a base year in terms of the tax return. If your student, we have a lot of families whose students are graduating in 2026. A very easy way to figure out what's the prior year, take the high school graduation year and subtract 2. So if your student's graduating in 26, well, guess what? 2024 is the base year. If they're graduating in 27, 2025 is the base year. That's a 2-year look back for income. Now, One of the largest driving factors behind this number is your adjusted gross income. That's line 11 of your 1040. That's a really, really big component. And that's the next bullet, and I didn't even see that ahead of time. So very important to keep that in mind. Very important to know your adjusted gross income as part of this process. There are some states that actually have income-based financial aid programs, and then also some schools which have made headlines for having income-based tuition-free programs. Student income is also considered. And student income, there's an income allowance, which I believe this slide's actually outdated. The income allowance is 11,510. So what that means is on the FAFSA, your student can earn $11,510 and it not be counted against you for the sake of financial aid. However, and this is really important to keep in mind, any dollar above and beyond that income allowance is assessed at 50 cents per dollar, 50%. So if your student were to make an extra $5,000 above and beyond that allowance, well, guess what? Financial aid eligibility has just been reduced by $2,500, half of that. So very important to keep that in mind. Anything you want to add to this slide, Dan?
No, sir, you're doing great. I'm just answering some questions.
Oh, thank you. All right. So what if your family doesn't qualify for need-based financial aid? That's totally okay, right? A lot of families that we meet with and work with don't qualify for any. The focus should be merit aid and competition and value schools. These are all things that you should consider. Now, this is part of the list building process and part of identifying colleges that your student's actually going to get merit scholarships at. As I mentioned earlier, some colleges don't even give merit scholarships. So it's important to know, will they get merit scholarships and approximately how much to make sure the college is going to be affordable for your family. Now, there are some colleges that still require the forms, the FAFSA, the CSS profile to even qualify for a merit scholarship. Also, it's important to still submit those for appeals and for future years. We'll dive into that later as well. And then in terms of strategies to try and maximize merit, a good one is applying to a competing college. So making sure that when it does come time to appeal later on, you've got leverage, right? You've got some comparison to use as part of that process. So I'm going to spend a minute. I'm going to stop sharing this and I'm going to start sharing my cap. Can you see it? We're all good? Okay. So when you go in here to mycap.collegeaidpro.com, and you create a profile, you're going to put some basic information in. So name, zip code, student assets, SAT scores, GPA, income, etc. And all of that is going to be used to calculate your family's student aid index, both the federal, which is the FAFSA number, and this CSS profile number, which some schools use in addition to the FAFSA. So if you'll look here, right, we have some very different numbers. This federal number is 66,000 and this institutional number is 38,000 to 45,000. Just a quick background. The reason the institutional number is less is because this family has 2 kids in college at the same time. In addition to that, the reason there's a range is because of home equity. So you would go in here, right? And then you would put all the schools that your student's interested in, and you could see the net costs. And you can see, in terms of affordability, how they're looking for your family. I think it would be good if anyone wouldn't mind putting a couple of schools in the chat that I can put in here so you can see what the potential net costs would be. Just want to give you some real world examples. I'm in New Jersey. I could tell you Rutgers off the top of my head. All right, so let me add Columbia. We'll add Columbia here. Oh, we're getting a lot. We have a WPI here. I'll add Fairfield. All right, so I'll add these 2 schools here. All right, so let me go back. So now I've added those 2 schools, and you can see here Columbia Columbia is showing it would cost this family $47,000, which this hypothetical family lives in Massachusetts and UMass is $38,000. So not too much more for Columbia, which is very interesting. In addition to that, we also put in Fairfield, and you can see Fairfield here. Fairfield is showing 56,000. We've got all of the information in here, right? So we've got, enrollment numbers, SAT numbers, we've got the financial information, all the merit scholarships that Fairfield gives. And we're projecting that this particular student is going to get around $28,500 in merit, which is why the cost is projecting what it's projecting. So all of this information is in here, and it's a great way to figure out ahead of time what some of these colleges are actually going to cost. Now, let me go here. Sure, it's why it's showing, but so you'll be able to see all of the schools that you enter in here. You'll also be able to search for additional schools based on type or major or even net cost. And then you'll be able to see on a very simple grid, right? Affordable, not affordable. Ideally, you want a lot down here to the bottom right. You don't want all of the schools up here in the top left. You want a nice mix across the range, but you're going to want at least some of them or most of them to be over here towards the right, because that means that they're fitting within your financial fit goals. Okay, let me take a break from the software and go back in here. All right. So what is it going to take to get this money from those colleges? So all those numbers we just showed you, there's a requirement, right? That's filing the FAFSA and maybe the CSS profile. So the FAFSA will go live October 1st this year. I've already mentioned the income year is the prior year. What's important is for any family on tonight's call who's divorced or separated, there's only one parent who fills out the form, right? And typically that's the custodial parent, but the exact wording and what they ask for on the FAFSA is the parent who provides the most financial support. So sometimes that takes a little bit of thinking, right? Maybe writing some numbers down. But oftentimes this too is a really big planning opportunity to qualify for additional aid. And one of the ways we really help divorce families. Now, to log into the FAFSA, you as a parent are going to need an account, and your student is also going to need an account. You create those accounts right on studentaid.gov. That's the federal website. And you're going to want to save all your information, your username, your password, backup code, challenge questions, all that stuff. You're going to want to save it. But yes, that's the FAFSA. Something in my throat tonight. All right, so the CSS profile. So some of those schools that we looked at, Columbia, American, Fairfield, and many, many more, right? Roughly 250 of them require an additional financial aid form. Now, the CSS profile, it too should go live 10/1, but there's some differences on this form. It's way more in depth. They treat home equity as a liquid asset at many of the colleges that use the CSS profile, meaning that home equity is treated the same as your checking account at many of the colleges. I think I saw Boston College in there, right? They use 100% of your of your home's equity, of your primary residence's equity. So it's important to keep that in mind if looking at any CSS profile schools. Also a planning opportunity to make sure you value your home correct. In addition to that, divorced or separated families, the FAFSA just requires that custodial parent or the parent who provides the most financial support, one parent to file it. In this situation, the CSS profile, a lot of the colleges that require the CSS profile also require non-custodial parent information via the non-custodial profile. So this is an additional form. There is a waiver for it, right? The waiver is no walk in the park. Dan, I know we've shared some clients this year who've all had to submit those waivers, and there's no guaranteed approval. But typical reasons, right? No contact for a decent amount of time, no financial support or abuse, right? That's the type of things that a college is looking for in terms of what would qualify for a waiver. The CSS profile asks for detailed business information. So if anyone on tonight's call is a business owner, there's quite a bit more that the profile is asking for. Business tax information, business valuations, you name it. Even the day was started. So sometimes there's room for mistake, but there's a big planning opportunity there as well. I've already said it's a bear compared to the FAFSA, and it truly is a much more detailed form with a lot more in terms of questions and more room for mistake. To get into the CSS profile, it's a little different than the FAFSA. There is no parent account. You log in with your students' College Board credentials, the same username and password that they use to register for the SAT. It's a little bit different there. Now, if anyone on the call tonight is a non-custodial parent, you have to create your own College Board account as if you're a student to actually fill out the non-custodial profile. I'm going to spend another minute in the software, so bear with me. Now, we have a financial aid forms tab in here as well. So you can track the status of your applications, you can track the forms, have you submitted them or not. And another thing is we have different levels of the software. What I'm showing tonight is our premium software. In here is line by line of the FAFSA and line by line of the CSS profile, basically a walkthrough. So important to keep that in mind as well. And just keep track of everything, which you can absolutely use MyCap for. All right, so let me stop here. All right, bear with me for 1 sec. Sorry for the screen sharing issues on my part tonight. In terms of appeals, I think it's fair to say that the appeals process is my favorite part of the process. This is something that every family should know exists, happens, is part of it, and should not skip over. This typically takes place spring of senior year. There's a few reasons it would happen earlier, but we're typically looking at spring of senior year. And for the appeals, right, you're sharing a story. You're trying to get additional financial aid. So in some cases, you may know how much more to ask for. If you're using leverage and you're using, hey, this college gave us a better offer, you want to show that. You don't just want to say it. Sometimes there are circumstances that are not on your tax return, right? Are not on the financial aid forms. There's expenses or circumstances. You can challenge those. You can mention them, right? These forms look largely at your taxes and your assets that you list, but anything else that's happening in your life is not reported on. Sometimes you have to follow up, be persistent. In many cases, having your student lead, super helpful. And that enrollment deposit, it's a catch-22 in some ways in my eyes, but that enrollment deposit doesn't mean that you're done appealing, but you usually want to have the appeals all said and done before you pay the deposit. But I mean, I just did 3 appeals last week. Doesn't mean if you pay the deposit, you can't still appeal. All right. I think we've covered quite a bit of financial aid, and I know we're at like the halfway mark, so I want to give you enough time, Dan, to talk about admissions.
Great, Kevin. I appreciate. By the way, folks, please do not put your questions in the chat. I've put that in there 3 times, and people are still putting questions in the chat box. So if you want your
Hard to keep
questions
up with.
answered or attempted to be answered, you got to put them in the Q&A. So yeah, I'm going to kind of take over, and we're going to talk about this whole list building idea. And I've got to tell you, in my 19 years of working with families through this process, I think you've got to be really, really focused on things. I will tell you, one of the changes that we've seen is the number of colleges that students are applying to. I mean, it used to be maybe 6 to 8. Now, 10 to 14, even 20 colleges. And just know this: when it comes to things like the Common Application, it'll take up to 20. There's been some expansion of that. I'm not here to encourage you to have your students apply to that many colleges, but just know that that's a possibility. What we need to do is we need to use balance. And what I mean by that is That includes, is it a financial fit for your family, academic fit for your student, a social fit, as well as a geographic fit? I think a lot of times families don't realize if one of these four, I call them the four pillars of the college selection, if one of those four pillars isn't solid as a rock, your student could come tumbling down. And so we really need to make sure that those are all in order and that that you've really picked the right kinds of schools to fit into what they're looking for. Okay, Kevin, next slide, please. So when we're talking about academic fit, here's what we mean by that. You need to know that we see this all the time. It's possible that a student could get accepted to a school academically, but rejected financially. I mean, it's one of those things. That's why when Kevin was talking about the appeals process, it's one of the big areas that at College Aid Pro we've been able to help with. But here's what I mean also. There are safety, target reach, and high reach schools that are out there. And it really comes down to where the student falls within the percentages. Safety means that your student is going to be competitive and have a great chance to get into school no matter what. And actually, as far as we're concerned, that also it's going to fit the family financially. Target is that there's a 50-50. It could go one way or the other when it comes to those averages. Reach means that when you look at the statistics, your student is maybe 50% of the average acceptance, and then high reach, or what we sometimes refer to as dream schools. Those are schools that are admitting kids that are only 25% or lower. So just realize that when it comes to this, there's a lot of things that come into it. Yes, academic rigor matters. In many cases, test scores will matter. Even for those of you that are, considering test optional, and we're going to talk about that in another slide here, but you got to be careful about that. And then, of course, there's GPA. So what does that all mean? Well, let's keep going here. So Kevin, if you could give the next slide, please. So financial balance truly means this. We believe that there's three types of colleges that are out there. Number one, a college a student could go with no debt. Woo woo! Love that idea, right? We've got financial freedom. Your student graduates, they can do all their first. They can buy their first car, their first condo or home. They can get married. They can do all kinds of things. Then there's reasonable debt. When we're talking about reasonable debt, what we mean by that is that your student doesn't have any more than about 1 times the amount in earnings they're going to make with their first job. That's reasonable debt. And or if they're going to go into, say, medicine or something else like that, there's an expectation that there could be more debt to make that dream come true as well. And then there's excessive debt. Excessive debt is the fact that a student has gone to a school, they've gotten a degree that can't ever really justify how much they're going to take out in debt. And yet, so many families, we all get caught up in this. We want the best for our children, but we just have to be careful about that. Best example I can give you is a few years back, I had a family I was working with that came to me. I guess they thought I was a miracle worker because the student had already gone to college for 5 years, graduated with a sociology degree and a criminology degree, and he had $256,178 worth of debt. Folks, that's excessive debt for both of those potential career paths. Don't do that to yourselves. Now, also know this, there's the difference between in-state versus out-of-state. You just have to know that. And there's also discounting that can indeed take place. If you've got an academic superstar student, it's possible that you could get in-state tuition at some of these schools. I mean, some of the schools that stand out are places like University of Alabama, and others that are out there. But really what it all comes down to is, again, does your student have what it's going to take to qualify for the scholarships at these colleges? And not only that, but do not assume, because we see this all the time. It's one of the reasons why the MyCap software is so powerful. It's going to show you whether your student's going to qualify for automatic scholarships, maybe likely scholarships, and it even shows competitive scholarships within those colleges and universities. Now, we do not make any guesses on the competitive scholarships intentionally, and even in many cases, the likely. But if it's an automatic opportunity, we're going to show that to you and help you so that you're seeing what the net price could be. Also, when it comes to application fees, college visits, test submission fees, it all adds up, folks. There's a cost associated with that. So just be careful. Remember, based on the number of schools that you're considering. All right, next slide, please. You also have to know that the rules of the game have changed. I can tell you that I'm almost 60, so that'll give you an indication of how long ago I went to college. I'm a lot younger than Kevin is. We make a good team though because of that. But what I will say is this. It depends on how you're going to apply to these schools. Maybe many of you have heard that, to get into a particular university, we have to apply early decision. And early decision meaning it's a binding opportunity for one school. It may be that you decide to do that, or restrictive early action, a very similar type of thing. Um, the one that I prefer, I think Kevin does too, and many of our associates do, is early action, because that's often the deadline that you have to follow when it comes to qualifying for scholarships, meeting those deadlines. There's also regular decision opportunities out there. Early decision two, which takes place in, say, the January timeframe, maybe the 1st of February. And then there are plenty of schools out there that also have rolling admission. Now, what does that mean? That means that they're going to continue to take applications until they fill their entire incoming freshman class, if they fill their incoming freshman class. So I know it can be confusing, right? But you've got to be very focused on what you're trying to do here, so that at the end of the day, you understand the different types of ways to apply, and you can have a very good conversation as a family to decide which direction you're going to go when it comes to this. Do not assume anything. Don't just assume that the only way to do this is to go with early decision. It actually may be that there's other opportunities out there as well. So be very careful about that. Okay, Kevin. Now, another thing that comes into play is how your student has positioned themselves. In other words, what have they done? We talk about it all the time. It's those impact types of things, the things that really count. So it is indeed their extracurricular activities. Anymore, these top colleges and universities out there are looking for students that have balance. It literally, they're not just superstars academically, but they've also done other things. They've done maybe a sport, some type of clubs that they've been involved with, maybe community service, in particular leadership, or they've got a talent that really stands out. All of these things add up depending upon the tier of college that you're going for. And what I mean by that is I look at it as tier one colleges being Ivy League schools, all the way down to tier seven, which are your junior colleges or your community colleges. So there's a lot of different levels of school in there. It's all about determining what's the right school fit for your student, and what are they going to do through their high school experience to position themselves to have a chance to get in. The other thing I will say is, and I sometimes run into this, I have some students that have got 20 different things that they've been involved with, and you start to look at it sometimes, and I get a little concerned as to whether or not they haven't and or shouldn't have been just focused on two or three things that they were doing really well. And so just know that that's part of the deal. And obviously we realize that if a student is doing athletics, both in the high school and from a club sports standpoint, that can consume a lot of time. It may make those other things a little bit more difficult, but it's all about trying to balance things out if you can. All right, Kevin, next slide, please. There's also a bunch of other grab bag admissions items that you need to know about. For example, right now I'm working with probably, I don't know, 10 different students that either are looking at athletic programs at colleges or the arts. I mean, this particular year, I've got a couple of dancers that I'm working with. There could also be other special programs that they're doing. So that's a whole nother spectrum of this admissions process. What about if they're going after the honors programs? Your student wants to get into an honors program at college as well. You got to do the research on those types of things. One of the biggest areas, and we're going to talk about the common application in just a couple of minutes, is the fact that so many students think that they've completed the base questions and the Common App essay, but they forget about the fact that many colleges have supplemental essays and or supplemental questions that also need to be completed. So, just make sure that they are being very clear, and also paying attention to all the details. Now, one of the concepts that's on here is demonstrated interest. And for those of you that may or may not understand this, there are colleges out there that, in order to even consider your student and or give them a chance to get admitted, they expect you to show up at their campus and do an official tour, to be connected with the admissions reps, to attend virtual sessions that they do, any number of ways that you can do demonstrated interest. But it's super important in many cases, depending upon, again, the difficulty or the selectivity, I should say, of the colleges that those your students are considering. We're going to talk about test optional policies here a little bit more in a minute. But again, don't forget there's also local college fairs that you can attend, which are just a great way to make a connection, as well as interviews that you may get a chance to do with alumni at some of the colleges or universities where they grant that. That also could be an interview that you do when you're actually doing an official visit to the school. You have to know all the pieces of the puzzle that it takes to put yourself in a position to be able to get into these schools. And again, these are just some of the individual pieces. All right, Kevin. So, what kinds of things are important to your students? In fact, students, if you're on here tonight, I mean, some of these things may stand out to you, right? Like the location, specifically what state. One of the big things that comes up often when I'm talking to students is, I'm tired of being in the cold. I'm heading south. Okay. They want to get out of the freezing weather and do some things. Or maybe it's the size of the school. I mean, I've had students say, I don't want to go to another school that's the same size as my high school. Or the location in this sense, the campus type. Is it a suburban campus, a rural or urban campus? Is it more of a commuter college, residential or a remote type of a situation? What about the academic interest or the other athletic and social and extracurricular activities that go on the campus? The good news is there's a lot of that information out there. We share some of this information now on the MyCap software, which is exciting. I mean, the fact that some of those details are in there. So, you're going to want to do it already. Kevin showed you how to search for colleges. You want to just make sure then that you're also doing some more, research into the individual schools that your students are considering. Okay, Kevin. But you also have to know that there's other items that students really should care about. And for that matter, mom and dad, you should too. You know, class size. In other words, faculty to student ratios make a big difference. I'll give you an example. Let's say that you go to or have your students considering going to a big flagship university, not to pick on a school, but let's say it's Ohio State University. Your student could be in an English class or a biology 101 class that is in an auditorium with a balcony with 200 other students. How is your student going to feel about that kind of situation? Is that going to be the right fit for them? How about access to office hours? What I mean by that is, does the professor have the ability for your student to go to see them when they're having trouble, when they need some guidance? Or is it going to be a teacher assistant or a grad assistant that actually is providing that kind of information? When it comes to college location, you may or may not think about the fact of how easy is it going to be to get internships or co-ops. Is it going to be in an area where maybe they're going to have a chance to get a job, or what kinds of transportation options are around? Is it going to be by train, by bus, by plane? Is it in such a rural area that you got to get commuted from a location to one of those destinations? And then, of course, when it comes to the campus, how's the student? I mean, how are your students going to feel about a really large campus where maybe they get around by bus or by, bicycle or scooter or whatever it might be, if that's available? Um, even skateboarding that takes place. What about the classes? What's the location of the classes going to look like? Are they on opposite ends of the campus and it makes it tough for them to get to one from one class to the other? How do they do with their scheduling and so forth? How about where the dorms are located? And then also the dining halls. I mean, it really all adds up to a total picture of things that you need to take into consideration when you are looking at the types of colleges your student is going to apply to. Okay, Kevin. So, mom and dad, what do you care about? Well, I'm going to share the very first one that's not listed immediately on here, but I think you care about the price. I may be kind of crazy about that, but I really do think it's a big deal, as well as the quality and depth of the education. Okay, it means a big deal to you. Um, if your students have access to the faculty, I mean, how are you going to feel if it turns out that your student doesn't get to go talk to their professors when they need to about things? What about the ability to get to your student in an emergency? This comes up all the time. I can't tell you the number of times that parents say, well, thankfully we've got, there's an aunt or an uncle or somebody that lives close by or within driving distance of the school. In this day and age, how about mental health and tutoring or career counseling? Super duper important that those kinds of resources are available. And thankfully, many colleges have recognized this and now are providing more of those types of services. Co-op and internship, I mentioned that a minute ago, but what a great way for a student to take their future career for a test ride, and actually try it out and see what they think about the different companies and the kind of work that they may do there. But again, career placement that's actually at the colleges or university could be a big deal. And then how about that alumni network? Now that may play a part even in how you feel about the school if you're an alum. But I will tell you that there's a lot of schools that are really strong when it comes to their network, meaning if you happen to have your student apply to a school where somebody else is an alumni, that could really go a long way for getting them hired, whether it's an internship or a future job that's out there. So, again, moms and dads, the key here is trying to match up and integrate what you want as well as what your student wants. I truly believe it's an important part of the conversation that needs to take place. All right, Kevin. So how about other college options? Well, when you're looking at the schools from an academic approach, is it more of a research institution or a school that deals more with theory? Is it group heavy projects that are going on, or thesis projects, or honors programs, or how about study abroad? Boy, am I ever jealous of all the students that are getting a chance to go do study abroad in this day and age. And then from the admissions requirements, is testing required? Are those additional essays required? Is an interview required or at least made available? And then the other special programs that are coming in. It just really all comes down to how, again, and the types of things that are important, not only to the student, but also with what you've got to get accomplished for the admissions process. Okay, Kevin. Now, when we're talking about highly competitive programs that are out there, and what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about things like engineering or pre-med or dental or physical therapy or nursing programs. What you're looking for in these kinds of cases is what kind of opportunity or exposure to the field is the student going to get? Do they have an advanced curriculum that's needed specifically to get them in those programs? I mean, you probably have heard of things like the guaranteed entrance into medical school programs. There's even architecture programs that sometimes go that way, or nursing for sure, and even PT. What are you going to do? Are there additional letters of recommendation that are required? Or, will there be specific research opportunities or summer programs that can really be used to help you? And then what about testing? In some cases, like with the MCAT, there may be testing that has to be done unless there's been a guaranteed entrance into that. And even sometimes in that case, that MCAT or the LSAT for law school and things might be required. Again, here's the thing. What we're basically saying is make sure that you're doing your homework and looking ahead for these types of things. There are some great programs out there. I mean, just some terrific programs. And if you've got a student who comes with all of the resume of accomplishments that they're looking for, there could be some chances for students to get in. In fact, if you look at a school like Johns Hopkins, with their medical school where it's paid for the student, and there's others like that potentially out there as well. Again, it comes down to how does your student position themselves to have those kinds of chances. All right, Kevin. So I mentioned we were going to talk about test scores. And here's what I would say to you. There are still a bunch of schools out there that are test optional, but I want you to see this list here and notice something. Do you notice the blue column, which is the admit rate for these schools without test scores, versus the green column, the admit rates with test scores? Notice the bump that you get. What is that telling you, folks? That's telling you that the colleges that even still say that they're test optional really do put a preferential approach to students who are submitting scores. Now, I want to be very careful about sharing this with you because this past May I was at Vanderbilt University, which happens to be one of these schools. And I will tell you that they were very cautionary when they said families that are on the fence, and believe me, I know this is a tough one. They're on the fence as to whether or not they should submit their test scores or not. I will tell you that in their case, and I think I'm correct on this, their middle 50% score was a 34 to 35 on the ACT. And their comment was, if you're not in that range, do not submit your scores because it's not going to hurt you. It's actually going, or it's not going to help you. It's actually going to hurt your admissions chances. So again, you've got to go into this with your eyes wide open, where you're doing the research and understanding where your student falls. It's another reason why, if you're in California, for example, and you're considering coming, towards the east to go to school, you're going to have to see whether or not you still have to take the SAT or the ACT to have a chance to get in. Or if you're looking at specific states, states like in Tennessee, or say Florida schools or Georgia schools, that the testing can come into play depending upon the universities that you're considering, or for sure the super duper selectives that are out there. Many of the top STEM schools have all gone back to requiring test scores. Again, do your homework. Do not be blindsided by this. And also know that sometimes these test scores can impact your ability to get the most competitive, say, full tuition or full ride scholarships, to be in the running for those. All right. So, there's really four types of college applications out there. There's college specific applications. Again, all 4,000 colleges and universities have these, just so that you know. There's university system applications, things like the SUNY, the University of California, Cal State, and the Apply Texas. There's the coalition application, and then there's the common application, which we're going to talk about here for just a minute. There's over 1,100 schools that are part of that. And so the nice thing about something like the coalition or the common application, it's one application where you can go in and you can apply to any number of colleges and universities. Obviously, the common app is way more than the coalition app is. The Apply Texas is for those Texas colleges, and the UC and Cal State are for the California schools, and the SUNYs are up in New York. So, but let's dive into and talk a little bit about the common application. So really, again, it's a centralized application. It's used by colleges in the United States, Canada, and some parts of the world. So you have to be very careful about that. It can be used in place of those colleges' own applications. That's the best part about it. So think about it. What that means is that you're writing one common app essay, the personal statement, unless the colleges, of course, have their supplemental questions and essays, as it says here. But just realize, again, that's a per school basis. But your starting foundation is set for you as far as your ability to put all your factual information in there, the students' academics, their GPA, your family dynamics, your current curriculum in your senior year. All those kinds of things come to play, as well as your testing. That all can be put in there so that you've got a great framework to run off of. Okay, Kevin? Where it all starts is by creating an account. This is what the page looks like. I will tell you that there's some big changes to the common application. We don't have time to talk about that tonight, but just know this, that when I say the changes, they're not significant. It's going to be a nice new look. It's going to be a little bit more user friendly, and it does give you the ability to go ahead and hop in there and actually set up your account. So here's what I'm going to say to you. Seniors, you should be in there right now. There's absolutely no reason that you shouldn't be in there working on your common application, realizing again, the last week of July coming up here, they're going to shut it down, because what they do is they clean out all the old students that have been in there and they move forward. Now, that does not impact you, because of course you're a 2026, 2027 applicant. So just know that your information will carry over, but do not put your essay in there, and also make a copy of your activities to make sure that you're going to be safe. But again, it's pretty simple to do this. In fact, if you want to go to the next screen for me here, Kevin. Again, you're going to go in, you're going to create your account, you're going to fill in all the information that you need to do. You're going to set up your password and all that kind of stuff. And of course, you're going to be putting in there planning to start college in 2026. You're going to find that before August the 1st, there's some things that you will not be able to put in, like, details that deal with 2026. But after August the 1st, suddenly everything associated with 2026 comes alive. So just do as much as you can now, and then be prepared to jump back in there to make a difference. Okay. Next slide. Last thing that we need to talk about, and then we're going to go back to talking about some next steps that you need to take, which is admissions deadlines. Know that every single college has a scholarship eligibility deadline and an admissions deadline. Honors college programs also have deadlines, and of course, the financial aid forms all have deadlines. It can get confusing, right? The best thing you can do is always be at the top of the pile, not the bottom of the pile when they're making decisions. So the common application, for example, again, opens up on August the 1st. Get working on it. Get those applications in early. Get them off your to-do list, especially if you're a busy student with athletics and your academics or whatever number of things you're doing. You have to wait until the FAFSA, as Kevin already shared, until October the 1st, and the CSS profile, those financial aid forms to do that. But proactively keep up with these deadlines. You do not want to miss these, because if you do, it could cost you thousands and thousands of dollars in the long way, or in the long game, as far as what we're doing. All right, Kevin.
Well, we've got a few things to talk about, but I just have to say, nice job. You covered so much in like 25 minutes that does everyone agree with me? That was incredible. That was so much valuable information. Okay. So, well, bear with me for one sec, folks. So let's talk about next steps, and let's talk about what every family should be focused on right now. Well, first off, hope everyone took some notes, and I hope everyone enjoyed what Dan and I covered on both the financial aid and admission side. Now, let's say that you still need some direction. Let's say that you want to know the best way that your family can approach this process. Dan and I are going to give the opportunity to meet with us. However, a few stipulations, really just two. You have to book it within the next 24 hours, and you have to meet with us before July 24th. It's really for your benefit, not for ours, although we are super busy. We can only work with so many families. So that being said, that is part of it. But Dan just mentioned, right? August 1st, this opens. October 1st, the FAFSA opens, CSS profile opens, although they're going to be testing it sooner, and some families may be invited to fill it out sooner than that. But all this stuff is happening right now. So super important. You know what? I'm actually going to put the link in the chat for anyone to book that. And our big promise and your big takeaway for that meeting, in that amount of time, we are going to tell you exactly how your family should approach this process. All right, so I just put that in there in the chat, everyone. Now, in addition to getting the free 15 minutes with Dan and I, we do work one-on-one with families, and we offer help on the financial side. We offer help on the admission side. We offer help on both. I mean, I do this every day, Dan, and I was impressed with everything you just said over the last 25 minutes. So if it were me, I would want to work with you. I'd want my student to work with you. But that being said, these are things that we can review. We don't work with every family. We want to make sure that you're a good fit, that you would benefit from what we offer. And we'd be able to really either save you a lot of time, energy. Usually we save families tons of money and they see a big ROI, but we want to make sure we can make that happen for you. So let us figure that out. That's another reason to meet with us first. If we think it's a good fit, we'll let you know and we'll make a recommendation. But we do walk families through this entire process, whether it's the FAFSA, the CSS, identifying colleges, appeals, even how to pay that bill, how to get in, the essays, you name it. Let's say that everything I've just said does not sound like your type of family. Let's say that your family is the type that prefers to really DIY things, right? Maybe you file your own taxes. Maybe you do your own home repairs, you name it, right? That's okay, and we get that. I would still take advantage of the time with Dan and I to understand the way you should approach this, but we do offer a premium membership in the software that I just showed you. And what I was showing you was premium. It's $4.99 a month. It's less than a cup of coffee. And with that, you'll get private scholarships. I think it's around $10 billion in private scholarships. You'll get net cost projections for unlimited colleges. You'll get dedicated presentations and office hours. So super helpful, all for $5 a month. That's something that at a minimum, every family should look into. Another thing that's super cool that we just started offering that I would encourage every parent on tonight's call to take advantage of is a $1,000 scholarship. Kind of, this is all, over the last probably 2 or 3 weeks that we started offering this and just put this scholarship contest out there. I think you just have to put your name in. It's super basic information, but you just have to put that in. And we always provide recordings of our presentations. And you'll see our colleague Jason was supposed to be on here tonight. He's down in Georgia, and they have some apparently very bad weather down in Savannah. So he had no power and could not join us. We did miss him. But this is what we would say is really a good next step. Did we put this in here? No, we did not. Um, I'm going to put this in the chat now, and then we'll save the last 5 minutes for some questions that we can answer aloud. But just a reminder for this, you really do have to book this before the 24th. Meet with us before the 24th, and you would actually need to book that within the next day. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing there. All right, back to just us. Alrighty, so there was a few questions, Dan, that I did not get to because they're admissions questions. Do you want
Yeah,
to
I've
take
been
some of
trying to
those
pound
aloud?
them out. Yeah, but you did a great job keeping up with them, Kevin.
I tried.
Yes, sir.
A full disclaimer, everyone, I do not do college admissions. That's Dan, right? I do financial aid, as does Dan. But that's why some of the questions in the Q&A went unanswered. Um, but
Yeah, looks like there was a follow-up to one of the questions that might have been asked earlier.
oh yes, that question was asking if the individual college application, so think an application for a specific college, if they allow you to mention special circumstances. That's what that question had asked, and I was waiting for you to answer.
Okay. I mean, it's possible if the individual college has space for that. I will tell you that in the common application, there's absolutely a spot where you can do it. And as a matter of fact, it's part of the changing that they're doing moving forward on the application is they've actually kind of reworked what they call it. Let's see. I don't know that I have it handy that I can tell you exactly what it's called now. But the point is, um, the common application and the coalition application both give you the ability to do that. And if it's something that you think you need to share, go right to the admissions people and share that with them so that it can be in your student's file. Okay. There's a question about will you talk about direct admissions? Honestly, that's a horse of another color in the sense that it depends on what you're trying to go for. You just have to know that it's super duper competitive. There's also different ways to do direct admit. I mean, there's options out there called like a 3+2 or a 3+4 like medical school 3+4, where a student can go to a college for 3 years and then they've got direct admit to a medical school for the 4 years. Um, so unfortunately, that's much more. I would encourage you to maybe work with us. That's something I've had experience working with students getting into direct admit into medical school, into PT programs, and the nursing programs. Um, so I mean, those kinds of opportunities are definitely out there. Can I keep going here?
Yeah, they're all most of them are admissions
Do
questions.
few
Yeah.
or low AP scores affect admissions decisions, or don't they look at it till after admission? Well, you have to remember you're ideally going to only report scores that are a 3, 4, or 5, and for the most competitive programs, they'll only take a 4 or 5. That's what they expect. I answered this question for somebody else earlier. So it truly comes down to the fact that colleges, for example, that are test optional, are expecting a holistic review, and that holistic review includes not only GPA and test scores, if you've submitted those, but the rigor of the curriculum that you've taken. Have you taken advanced placement or international baccalaureate types of courses? And how, not only that, but how have you done in those courses? All of those things add up, plus your extracurriculars, plus your essay, plus your letters of recommendation and the supplemental essays. I mean, there's a whole lot more to that because of the fact that we're dealing with every single college having their own expectations. So hope that helps a little bit. Let's see. Oops. Oh my goodness, what am I doing wrong here? I keep hitting this thing. Answers live, done. Okay. Okay, somebody's asking about the premium subscription, Kevin.
Yeah, you know what? I'll just show that for a second here.
Or
So the question was in the how to pay tab, can you reset it? You reset your how to pay tab with your college budget, right? So your college budget drives the how to pay section. You would need to redo this to change that. Other than that, it's just the schools going over the funding gap, etc. But this is another, I didn't even click on this when I was going through the software. This is another feature of the software as it goes over the funding gap, how to pay, etc.
there's
But
just so much great information in that platform. It's incredible.
yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Um, absolutely.
You want to take the next
Um,
one as well?
yeah, sure. Which is the next one? Two students. Yes. So I don't know if you remember when I was screen sharing the software, that number, the federal number was a lot higher than the institutional number. Um, That's because schools that use the CSS profile, if you have two students in college at the same time, you're going to get a discount. It's not exactly half. It really depends if it's a public or private school that the other student's going to, but oftentimes it's somewhere around a 30 to 40% discount per student in terms of your SAI. So it could definitely be a benefit. But usually, if a family has twins, that's a really big planning opportunity to look at the right schools. And that's something that you could meet with us so we can help you with it for sure. Um, does your software rate colleges? We have Forbes rankings in there.
We do Forbes, US News, and also
News.
Money.
Yep.
Money's
So
in there as well.
we've got rankings in there.
Yep.
We do have someone's a college financial aid consultant. We do have access where you can use what we offer. I believe to support your families. That's a great question. Where honestly, the best answer to that is meet with us. Let's see how we can help you and help your families most importantly. But
I think we're good.
I think we're good. Just a reminder, if you do want to meet with Dan and I, and you do want to take advantage of the free session, you do have to book it right away within the next 24 hours. But most importantly, you have to meet with us before July 24th. I just dropped that link in the chat once more. And aside from that, register for the $1,000 parent scholarship. It's rare. There's not many parent-only scholarships. They're mostly for students. So take advantage of that. We hope that everyone enjoyed what we went over tonight. But yeah, thanks for your time, Dan. This was awesome.
Yeah, same here, Kevin. Thanks everybody for attending. We wish you nothing but success and look forward to seeing you again and hope that we can partner together to help you navigate your way through this wild and crazy process called college.
And
Have a
save
great
you a
day
lot of money.
and save you a lot of money. That's right.
All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.